Hey guys, what's good? Welcome back to JDB Selects. Sorry for the delay in getting this video up. It was a public holiday in NZ yesterday, so I had to make the most of it. I'm not sure if it was a public holiday everywhere, but if it was, I hope you enjoyed it too. Hope you had a great weekend. Round 14 done and dusted. We're now officially over halfway through the regular season. 13 more rounds left to go. Looking forward to round 15, but first let's look back at how we did last week. So last week there were only 7 games and we managed to tip 5 out of 7. I think you were unlucky if you picked the Tigers or the Bulldogs, or on the other hand, you were lucky if you picked the Raiders and the Roosters. So we were on the right side of one of those, but obviously we missed the Tigers game, and I was never going to take the Cowboys to get past the Storm, but full credit to North Queensland. They played with some serious aggression and speed, but we'll take a 5 out of 7, you know. Now, we are 14 rounds into the season, but if you don't know by now, we are running a subscribers tipping competition this year. All the details to join are shown on screen now. So if you are still keen, you can still join. We do have a new leader in the tipping comp too this week. Rabbitohs takes out the top spot for the first time, knocking off Jared 68 only on margin. It's still super competitive at the top of the ladder, so congrats to Rabbitohs. Good luck to everyone again this week. Let's get stuck into my tips for round 15. Alright, kicking off the action on Thursday, we have the 13th placed Gold Coast Titans taking on the 16th placed West Tigers at Cbus Super Stadium on the Gold Coast. Starting first with the Titans, well, they've done it again. The Titans have blown another halftime lead for the 4th week in a row, this time getting burnt late by the Rabbitohs 28 points to 46. As I feel like I say every week, the Titans were solid for the first 40, despite the absence of Foran and Brimson, matching South's intensity and going try for try before completely falling off a cliff, conceding 30 unanswered points and only managing a single second half try in the dying stages. The Titans lacked any punch off their bench, which is why I believe they struggle late into games, especially once fatigue sets in. Couple that with the fact that Fafita only played limited minutes, and it's not really a surprising result. And as I did just mention briefly, Foran and Brimson are still both not expected to be available until round 17, which will only make this origin period tougher for the Gold Coast. And as for the Tigers poured on 19 unanswered points in 5 minutes against the Raiders to give themselves the lead with 4 to play before a silly penalty gifted Jamal Fogarty and the Raiders a 20-19 point win. The Tigers were far from their best for a majority of that game with 15 errors, but statistically they did dominate the Raiders on attack with 7 line breaks to none and triple the amount of tackle breaks. Canberra's scrambled defense frustrated the Tigers, but once they finally got across the line, they smelled blood and almost salvaged a win. Buller continues to impress in just his 6th first-grade game, running for over 200 meters and scoring the Tigers' first try. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Gold Coast have won 9 of the past 11 games. That does include 4 straight. However, they only have a 58% all-time win rate against the Tigers on the Gold Coast. Another Thursday doozy for the tipping comp, but I am going to take the Tigers here by 1 to 12 points. Despite what the stats say, I think the Tigers have some super solid defense. They obviously had an off night in attack last week against the Raiders, but I do think that they can find some holes in a pretty abysmal Titans defensive line. So Tigers 1 to 12. Alright, now moving to the 2 Friday games, starting first with the 6th placed Raiders taking on the 7th placed NZ Warriors at GIO Stadium in Canberra. Starting first with the Raiders, Canberra managed to hold on against a late blitz from the West Tigers to secure a 20-19 point win. The Raiders were up 18-0 with 12 to play and looked to be home and hosed until Tom Starling was sin-binned and the Tigers scored 19 unanswered points before a late penalty in front of the sticks gave Jamal Fogarty and the Raiders the win. Canberra showed great scramble defense to keep the Tigers scoreless for almost 70 minutes, but they didn't offer much on attack, except brilliance mixed with a bit of luck from Jamal Fogarty, who scored twice off kicks at the uprights and set up Canberra's only other try off his boot. Quite impressively, the Raiders have a near 70% win rate when Jamal Fogarty is playing, and that was another prime example of how important his kicking game is for that side. Seb Chris is expected to be named this week alongside Jared Croker, who was rested last week so that he could play his 300th game at home. And as for the Wars, the Warriors stormed home, thumping the Dolphins 30 points to 8 thanks to another vintage performance from Sean Johnson. SJ had his best game of the season, scoring the opening try and helping his side maintain their composure. His effort was complemented by another inspiring performance from Darlin Watene-Zelezniak and big shifts from the Warriors middles, who took it to the Finns forwards. It was a much improved performance following their disappointing loss to an understrength Broncos side the week prior. However, they still left plenty of points out there, especially on that left edge, so that's something they will need to fix up as it has come back to haunt them in close games. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, there are no clear stats here. Both sides have enjoyed success over each other frequently. Ooh man, this is another tough one, especially because there's a bit of bias involved, but I am going to back my boys here. I'm going to take the Warriors 1-12. I think they're playing some good footy. I know the Raiders obviously have Jared Croker's 300th game, so they'll surely have a big crowd there, and the boys will be up for it, but I'm just going to do it. Warriors 1-12. And the final game on Friday has the 10th placed Manly Sea Eagles taking on the 8th placed Dolphins at 4 Pines Park. Starting first with the Sea Eagles, Manly enjoyed their second bye of the season last week, but last time out were bested by the Knights 28 points to 18. As is often the case, the Sea Eagles' struggles continued without Turbo and DCE, who were involved in the Origin camp, as the Knights got through almost 10 more sets and missed half as many tackles. They will be without Turbo again this week, as he is subject to the NRL's 11-day stand-down period after he copped a head knock in Origin Game 1. Josh Aloiai is expected to be available this week after overcoming a shoulder injury, but they will still be without Jake Trbojevic, Aaron Woods, and Kalma Tuolangi. And as for the Dolphins, the Finns' maiden voyage across the Tasman was one to forget, going down to the Warriors 8 points to 30. Despite still missing a handful of key players to injury, origin, and suspension, the Dolphins only found themselves down by 2 at the break before the sin binning of Anthony Milford for a late tackle opened the floodgates for the Warriors. The Dolphins' already limited depth will now be tested even further, with Milford being suspended for 3 games, as has Jared Wallace for a shoulder charge. Good news though is Hamiso returns to the fray this week after starring in his Origin return, which will likely mean Cody Nikorima will slot into the halves. There's no head-to-head stats to go off in this one, as this is the first time these two sides have faced, but I do like the Sea Eagles here 13+. The Dolphins just have too many players out, and I do think the Sea Eagles can romp home, especially off the back of a bye. Kicking off the action on Saturday, we have the last placed St George Illawarra Dragons taking on the third placed South Sydney Rabbitohs at Netstrata Jubilee Stadium. Starting off first with the Dragons, St George gave the competition-leading Panthers a good run for their money on Sunday night, but even without Cleary, the Dragons couldn't get it done on the road, going down 18 points to 26. The Dragons were unlucky to be 12 all at the break, with the goal kicking of Zach Lomax keeping the Panthers within striking distance. The Dragons were, however, on the wrong side of one of the strangest knock-on calls I can remember, which could have seen Tyrell Sloan run down the sideline deep into Panthers territory, but instead the call was changed late and the Panthers subsequently scored not long after to take the lead. The Dragons will be boosted by the returns of Jack Bird and Blake Laurie this week, but will be without Jack de Belin after he was knocked out cold and had to be taken from the field in a stretcher. And as for the Rabbitohs, South Sydney survived a late first half scare from the Gold Coast Titans, pouring on the paint in the second 40 to win 46 points to 28. It was an attack-orientated game with 13 combined tries, including another Alex Johnston hat-trick, which ultimately played into South's hands down the stretch, with Souths tightening up their defence and the Gold Coast unable to follow suit. Damien Cook was outstanding out of dummy half, pushing his case for an Origin return. That allowed Cody Walker to torment the Titans line, and how good was it to see Kolomatangi back running at full flight. The Bunnies' win was overshadowed by injuries to Jai Arrow and Cam Murray, which may mean both players missed this week's game and may have huge Origin ramifications depending on the severities. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, Souths have been dominant over the Dragons for the past 10 years. They've won 15 of the past 18 games against the Dragons, with St George snapping an 8-game losing streak last time these two sides met. I like the Bunnies here, so I am going to take the Rabbits 1-12. I think there are a few key outs for the Souths which may give the Dragons a bit of a sniff. The Dragons are playing some confident football at the minute under their new interim coach, so it could easily be Souths 13+, but I am going to err on the side of caution and go Rabbits 1-12. The second game on Saturday has the second place Brisbane Broncos hosting the 11th placed Newcastle Knights at Suncorp Stadium. Starting first with the Broncos, Brisbane became the first side to record double-digit wins in 2023 with an impressive 20-12 point win over the Cronulla Sharks in Sydney. Even with a majority of their Origin players backing up, the Broncos pushed the pace with Katoni Staggs setting the tone early. Staggs scored the opener and ran for over 200 metres with 7 tackle busts, 2 line breaks and a try assist. Despite losing the field position battle, the Broncos' defense was up for the challenge, restricting the Sharks to just a single try in each half. Selwyn Cobbo was unable to play following the hip injury he sustained during State of Origin, but Corey Oates was great in his return to the side and should fill that gap just fine if Cobbo is unavailable again this week. And as for the Knights, Newcastle will be fresh off their second bye in 4 weeks, but back in round 13 they ambushed the Sea Eagles 28 points to 18. The performance was highlighted with a hat-trick from Greg Marju, but the real magic for me was having Kalen Ponga return to fullback and Hastings and Gamble in the halves, who have already built a pretty solid combination in the limited time they've had. Dom Young also scored what could easily be try of the year with a near 100-metre effort to secure his side the win. After a string of injuries and positional changes, the Knights finally look settled on a 17 and now come up against a Brisbane side stacked with Origin players, while they will be fresh off another bye, which could easily mean another Newcastle ambush. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Broncos have won 3 straight against the Knights. They've also won 7 of the past 9 games against the Knights at Suncorp and have an 80% win rate in Brisbane against the Knights. Because of that, I'm obviously going to take the Broncos in this one. I think the Broncos should win. I am going to take the Broncos only by 1 to 12 points though. I think the Knights could surprise a few here. The Broncos defense was obviously outstanding last week, so if they could do that again, it could easily be Brisbane 13+, but I am going to err on the side of caution once again and just take the Broncos here 1 to 12. And the final game on Saturday has the 9th placed Sydney Roosters taking on the 1st placed Penrith Panthers at the new Allianz Stadium. Starting first with the Roosters, they secured a crucial 1-point win over the Bulldogs thanks to a Luke Keary field goal, but it was another far from convincing performance, with the Roosters only claiming the lead with 5 minutes to play. James Tedesco had been heavily criticised following Origin Game 1 and came out with a point to prove, scoring half of the Roosters' tries, running for over 200 metres and breaking 11 tackles. I thought Keary had another decent run at 7, but I would love to see Joey Manu back at centre running more direct. Joseph Suali'i has been suspended for 3 games after making contact with his knee on Reid Marnie's chin, but Daniel Tupou is expected to return from his hamstring injury this week. And as for the Panthers, they managed to defeat a game Dragons outfit 26 points to 18 to end round 14, but the big storyline out of that game is Nathan Cleary is out for the next 6 weeks with a hamstring injury. Cleary pulled up lame in the 16th minute and wouldn't return, with Jack Cogger taking his place on debut. All the Panthers Origin players backed up on a 4-day turnaround and all played crucial roles in the win, with To'o scoring a double, Crichton kicking the goals, Edwards eating meters as usual, and Isaiah Yeo setting up the match-winning try for Moses Leota. Penrith have showed time and time before just how good their depth is, but I think having Cleary out during this period is going to be super interesting, and it definitely makes it hard to tip. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Panthers have won 8 of the past 9 games against the Roosters. That includes 7 straight. This will, however, be the first time these two sides have met at the new Allianz Stadium. As I've just said, with Cleary out, it does make tipping the Panthers a little bit more scary, but I am going to take the Panthers here by 1 to 12 points. They should be far too strong, even without Cleary, for a pretty disappointing and underwhelming Roosters outfit. There's only one Sunday fixture this week, and that's the 5th placed Melbourne Storm taking on the 4th placed Cronulla Sharks at Amy Park in Melbourne. Starting first with the Storm, Melbourne were absolutely torched by the Cowboys 20 points to 45 in a game that saw the Storm concede their highest total since 2003. The Storm's defence was ordinary and couldn't match the intensity of the Cowboys players, who had clearly gained a ton of confidence following their performances in State of Origin. Despite being locked at 14 all at halftime, Melbourne missed twice as many tackles and could only manage 43% of possession. Only one Melbourne forward made over 100 metres, and Munster and Hughes went completely missing in the second half. Justin Olam also succumbed to a head knock during the game and may spend another week on the sidelines. And as for the Sharks, Cronulla were also defeated last week 20-12 by the Brisbane Broncos. It was a scrappy game with a near 30 combined errors, but the Broncos' defence frustrated the Sharks, whose attack was clunky and, despite having arguably more chances, could never find the spark they needed. Hines was again the standout for the Sharks, and now given that Nathan Cleary is confirmed to miss the remainder of the Origin series, he will surely be given the reins. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Storm have won 5 of the past 6. Melbourne have also won 12 of the past 14 games against the Sharks in Melbourne. Man, this is a super tough game to tip too. I think both sides have a near identical record in the past 5 games. They're both obviously coming off pretty disappointing and slightly embarrassing losses, both for different reasons. So both sides will be wanting a big response this week, but I am going to lean with the home side here, the Storm, by 1 to 12 points. I think after they conceded their highest total in almost 20 years, I think Craig's going to whip them into shape well and good this week. So Storm 1 to 12. And the final game of round 15 takes place on Monday, with the 15th placed Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs taking on the 12th placed Parramatta Eels at Accor Stadium. Starting first with the Dogs, Canterbury were unlucky to not beat the Roosters, getting their pockets picked late to go down 24 points to 25. The Dogs were all over the Roosters for a majority of the match and only relinquished the lead with 4 minutes to play. The combination of Burton and Adokar continues to bear fruit, and while Tavita Pangai Jr. copped a fair bit of criticism following his performance in Origin Game 1, he was certainly out to retain his jersey, scoring the opening try and running for almost 200 metres. Reid Marnie and Jacob Kiraz may be named to play this week given the long turnaround, but Sam Hughes and Faitala Mariner should be back this week. And finally, as for the Eels, Parramatta enjoyed the bye last week, but prior to that they managed to edge past the Cowboys 24 points to 16. The Eels just seem to be that side that play to their opponent's level, because when they face teams like the Panthers or the Rabbitohs, they seem to lift their game entirely, but when they face lower ranked sides, they also seem to fall into those traps. Eels 5'8" Dylan Brown is in hot water this week after an alleged assault and may be stood down. Andrew Davey is set to return this week, but Ryan Madison, RCG and Sean Lane are still a few more weeks away. Looking at the two sides head to head, the Eels have won 12 of the past 15 games against the Dogs and have won 3 of the past 4 games against them at Accor. I'm going to be brave here, guys. I'm going to take the Dogs here by 1 to 12 points. I know the Eels are coming off the bye, but I just feel there's something building with the Dogs, and something about the Dogs on a Monday upsets against the Eels. It just makes sense to me. It's literally a vibe tip. So take it or leave it. It's a vibe tip. Dogs 1 to 12. Alright, boom. So in summary, I'm taking the Tigers and Warriors 1 to 12, the Sea Eagles 13+, the Bunnies, the Broncos, the Raiders, the Storm, and the Dogs all by 1 to 12 points. Thanks as always for watching. If you are new here and you haven't hit subscribe yet, what are you doing? Hit that button, leave a like on the video, drop your tips down in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next one.